When Ellen Wooldridge allowed her estranged husband to enter her home on the evening of May 29, 1896, she was apprehensive to say the least. Just a few weeks earlier, he had violently attacked her, accusing her of having an affair. Now, he was pleading for forgiveness, and believing him to be sincere, Ellen naively let him in. This was a choice she would soon regret. In today's episode of Well I Never, the story of Charles Thomas Wooldridge, a trooper with Britain's Royal Horse Guards whose violent crime was immortalised in the poem written by one of the most celebrated authors of the 19th century. Not much is known about the early years of Charles Thomas Wooldridge. In fact, the exact date of his birth is unclear. Some sources claim that he was born in 1864 in East Garston, Berkshire, while others say that he was actually born 2 years later in 1866. Regardless of his birth date, Wooldridge came from humble beginnings. The son of a labourer, he worked as a ploughboy during his teenage years, using his meagre salary to support his parents and younger brother, Albert. In search of better opportunities, he decided to join the Royal Horse Guards and by 1891 was stationed as a trooper in the town of Farnborough in Hampshire, a county in southeast England. There, he met 19-year-old Laura Ellen Glendale, who had travelled from her hometown of Bath to work as a draper's assistant. She was well versed in this particular industry, since her father, Alfred George, was a successful woolen draper who sold wholesale fabrics to clothing manufacturers. The two quickly fell in love and, after a long courtship, were married on December 9, 1894, in Kentish Town, London. Ellen was 22, while Wooldridge was 30, or thereabouts. Wooldridge, however, had failed to ask his commanding officer for permission to marry Ellen, which forced the newlyweds to live apart from each other when he was transferred from Farnborough to Windsor Castle in the county of Berkshire. While Wooldridge lived with his fellow guards at the barracks, his wife rented a room here at what was then 21 Alma Terrace, located just a few minutes away from Windsor Castle. She found work as an assistant at the post office, where she was well liked by her colleagues, with her supervisor even describing her as intelligent, courteous, obliging, and punctual. She also took up a training course in telegraphy at the nearby town of Reading. Sometime in the late 1890s, Wooldridge was transferred from Windsor Castle to Buckingham Palace in London, which made it harder for the couple to see each other. Because of their jobs, they could only meet for a few hours each week, which drove a wedge, of course, between them. By the beginning of 1896, it was said that the marriage between Wooldridge and Ellen had become strained. In January of that year, Alice Cox, a cousin of Charles Wooldridge, moved in with Ellen, allegedly after he ordered her to keep an eye on his wife. The two women disliked each other, with Alice claiming that Ellen was obstinate and was going by her maiden name to hide the fact that she was married. There were rumours that Ellen was having an illicit affair behind Wooldridge's back. However, Alice later admitted that she had seen no evidence of this. While Robert Harvey, a trooper stationed nearby, did pay Ellen a visit, he remained in the sitting room and had left the house early. Despite his cousin's overbearing presence and her assurances that Ellen wasn't having an affair, Wooldridge grew increasingly jealous and suspicious of his wife. He also became possessive of her, often arriving at the house unannounced in a bid to catch her red-handed with another man. On March 16, 1896, during one of Wooldridge's surprise visits, a fight broke out between the couple, which led to him punching Ellen repeatedly in the face. It was said that she emerged from their bedroom with 2 black eyes and a severely broken nose. This attack was the final straw for Ellen, and to try and ensure her safety from Charles, she wrote a note to his commanding officer. It read, "My lord, Pardon me troubling you. I would not do so if I could help it. I wish to tell you about Charles Wooldridge. He came down a fortnight ago and behaved in a most strange manner and had some sort of fit. On Friday, he came down again in the evening and we disagreed. And he struck me as violently as he could in the face, blackening my left eye and causing my cheek to swell and become discoloured. And it is most painful now. I told him I should complain to his officer about him, and he promised he would sign a paper stating that he would never come near me again. May I ask you to make him do this and send it to me, as I feel far from safe. He might come again and repeat the treatment, and as I am in business in Windsor, I should lose my situation if I prosecuted him. And of course, he knows that. I had to tell my employer this morning that I had fallen downstairs and so disfigured myself. I do not write this to get Wooldridge punished. I want him to sign that paper so that I may have safeguard against this coming. May I implore you never to let him come down here again. If you would grant me an interview, I could explain everything to you which I cannot do in writing. Please allow me to see you. Again, asking your pardon. Believe me to be yours very respectfully, L.E. Glendale. Sadly, it seems that Ellen would never get the meeting she sought. But on March 29th, she was once again visited by Wooldridge, this time bearing the contract she had asked him to sign. He wanted to talk. Ellen agreed and allowed her husband to enter her home. Unfortunately, her willingness to hear her husband out would have dire consequences. At the time, Alice Cox was also inside the house, although Ellen sent her away to fetch her hat and coat. Soon after she dashed out onto the street upon hearing a terrible scream which, according to her story, occurred shortly after Wooldridge's arrival, though by the time she arrived on the scene, it was already too late. Ellen and Charles walked into their front garden, and there Wooldridge produced a razor and attempted to slash Ellen's throat. Ellen screamed murder and ran into the road. Wooldridge gave chase, threw her to the ground, and accomplished his dreadful work. After nearly severing her head, he fled the scene, leaving the bloody razor behind. A few hours after this gruesome discovery, Wooldridge turned himself in to the local police, confessing that he had murdered his wife because, quote, she had been carrying on a fine game, end quote. His statement led the coroner to conclude that the murder had been caused by, quote, some misunderstanding between Wooldridge and the deceased, and it looked like a case of jealousy, end quote. Given that he had admitted to the crime, Wooldridge was placed on trial almost immediately after the murder. Proceedings against him began on June the 18th, 1896, and were held here at Reading Crown Court, the Berkshire Court of Assizes, as it was then. His defence team argued that he was a passionate man who loved his wife dearly and was distraught by her treatment of him. They also argued that he was driven to murder his wife after hearing rumours that she was having an affair with another man. However, the presiding judge, Justice Sir Henry Hawkins, disagreed with the defence, saying, quote, if a woman expressed her wish to have nothing to do with her husband, that was no justification why the husband should commit murder, end quote. His sentiments were shared by the jury, who found Wooldridge guilty of killing his wife a mere 2 minutes after his trial ended. They did recommend that mercy be shown to him since the murder was provoked, but this was overturned and he was instead sentenced to death. On July the 7th, 1896, Charles Thomas Wooldridge was hanged here in Reading Gaol. Meanwhile, the body of his 24-year-old wife was laid to rest in the graveyard at St Andrew's in Clwyd, Windsor. There were many other people incarcerated at Reading Gaol while Wooldridge was being held there. Its most famous prisoner at the time was the celebrated author Oscar Wilde, who garnered fame for his play The Importance of Being Earnest and his best-selling novel The Picture of Dorian Gray. Wilde was incredibly popular. However, he did have his critics. The most vocal of them all was John Douglas, a Scottish nobleman and the 9th Marquess of Queensberry, whose son Alfred was rumoured to be in a homosexual relationship with Wilde. Not only was homosexuality considered a societal taboo at the time, but it was also a criminal offence, with the Criminal Law Amendment Act of 1885 explicitly prohibiting sexual relationships between men. While Wilde did his best to hide his sexual orientation, his flamboyant behaviour caused rumours that he was secretly gay. This, combined with his close friendship with Alfred Douglas, led to Sir John publicly condemning him. To save his reputation, Wilde sued him for libel. In retaliation, Douglas alleged that Wilde had solicited 12 different boys to commit sexual acts with him between 1892 and 1894. He managed to secure a mountain of evidence to prove his allegation, which led to Wilde's lawyer withdrawing his counsel on the 3rd day of the proceedings. Shortly afterward, an arrest warrant was issued for Wilde on charges of indecency. He was given the opportunity to flee to France. However, he decided to remain in England to stand trial. It was a humiliating ordeal for him, with several witnesses coming forward and testifying that they had seen him engaging in sexual activities with other men. In the end, Oscar Wilde was convicted of sodomy, with the presiding judge remarking, quote, "It is the worst case I have ever tried. I shall pass the severest sentence that the law allows. The sentence of the court is that you be imprisoned and kept to hard labour for 2 years." End quote. Wilde was incarcerated at Reading Gaol, where he was made to carry out back-breaking physical labour, such as unravelling old ropes that were salvaged from ships. This punishment, referred to as oakum picking, caused Wilde's fingers to bleed. He would remain here for 2 years. During that stay, of course, he would learn of Wooldridge and the murder, and was still here when Wooldridge was hanged. He would also go on to memorialise the murder in a line from his very famous poem, The Ballad of Reading Gaol. According to The Guardian, quote, "The poem is dedicated to the memory of the sometime Royal Horse Guards trooper, Charles Thomas Wooldridge, and the central incident is Wooldridge's execution for the murder of his wife." Around this narrative core, whose genre might be described as Gothic realism, Wilde builds a meditation on the paradoxes of morality. The ballad is an indictment of the death penalty and the whole penal system, but it is much more than a protest poem. It is a revelation, and its structure is part of that revelation. End quote. The poem's refrain, "For each man kills the thing he loves," has become one of the most famous lines that Wilde has ever written, thought to be a reference to both his relationship with Alfred Douglas and Wooldridge's violent crime. The poem ends with this haunting stanza, and I quote, "And all men kill the thing they love, by all let this be heard. Some do it with a bitter look, some with a flattering word. The coward does it with a kiss, the brave man with a sword." If you've enjoyed this crime story from the past, check out our other episodes. Right then, take care, and I'll see you in the next one, where I'll tell you a story that will make you say, "Well, I never."